The coffee mug slipped from Maya Chen's trembling fingers, shattering against the worn linoleum floor of Rosie's diner. Her first day as a waitress, and she was already making mistakes. The lunch rush hadn't even started, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the autumn chill seeping through the restaurant's drafty windows. She grabbed a towel from her apron, kneeling to clean up the mess while trying to steady her nerves. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "You okay there, honey?" called Rosie Martinez from behind the counter, her weathered hands never pausing as she prepped vegetables for the day's soup. The 60-year-old owner had given Maya this job when no one else would, despite her complete lack of restaurant experience. Maya forced a smile. "Just nervous, I guess." She swept the ceramic pieces into her palm, careful not to cut herself. 3 months ago, she'd been working at a prestigious marketing firm downtown. 3 months ago, she'd had a steady paycheck, a nice apartment, and a future that seemed secure. Now she was starting over at 28, living in a studio apartment above the laundromat, trying to rebuild her life one tip at a time. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya's first customer of the day walked in. She straightened up, smoothing her uniform and grabbing a menu from the stack. The man who entered looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, and his dark hair was styled with the kind of precision that spoke of expensive salons. He glanced around the modest diner with what appeared to be mild distaste before sliding into a corner booth. Maya approached with her best customer service smile, the one she'd perfected during her brief stint in retail between jobs. "Good morning. Welcome to Rosie's. Can I start you off with some coffee?" The man didn't look up from his phone. "Black coffee. And make it fast. I don't have all day to waste in here." The dismissive tone stung, but Maya maintained her composure. She'd dealt with difficult clients before, though admittedly in air-conditioned conference rooms rather than a small-town diner. "Of course. I'll be right back with that." Maya hurried to the coffee station, her hands still slightly unsteady as she filled a clean mug. The rich aroma should have been comforting, but her stomach was too knotted with anxiety to appreciate it. She needed this job to work out. Her savings were nearly depleted, and the bills wouldn't wait for her to find her footing. When she returned to the table, the man was speaking rapidly into his phone, gesturing with his free hand. "No, that's not what I told you yesterday. The Henderson account needs to be handled delicately, not steamrolled." "Do I have to do everything myself?" Maya set the coffee down gently, trying not to interrupt his call. As she turned to leave, his voice cut through the air like a blade. "Excuse me." He'd hung up and was now glaring at her with the kind of cold intensity that made her feel about 2 inches tall. "This coffee is lukewarm at best. I asked for hot coffee, not dishwater." Maya felt her cheeks burn. She'd just poured it from a fresh pot, and steam was still rising from the surface. "I'm sorry, sir. I can get you a fresh cup right away." "You can do better than that. And while you're at it, explain to me why a simple request for hot coffee seems to be beyond your capabilities." The words hit like physical blows. Maya had been yelled at by demanding bosses before, but never with such casual cruelty. Still, she needed this job. She needed the tips. She needed to prove to herself that she could handle whatever life threw at her. "I apologize for the inconvenience," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Let me get you a fresh cup and bring it right out." The man waved her away dismissively. "Just get it right this time." Back at the coffee station, Maya's hands shook as she prepared another cup. Rosie appeared beside her, having witnessed the exchange from across the restaurant. "Don't let him get to you, Misha," Rosie said softly, her accent adding warmth to the words. "Some people think money gives them the right to treat others like dirt. But you know what? Those are the ones who need kindness the most." Maya appreciated Rosie's support, but kindness felt like the last thing she wanted to offer right now. Still, she nodded and carried the fresh coffee back to the corner booth, setting it down with practiced care. The man tested it with a small sip, his expression unchanged. "Better. Now, I need to see a menu, and I don't want to wait 10 minutes for it." Maya handed him the laminated menu she'd been carrying. Would you like a few minutes to look it over? I'll have the breakfast special. Eggs over easy, but if they're even slightly runny, I'm sending them back. Bacon crisp, not burned. Hash browns golden, not pale. And I want whole wheat toast, lightly buttered. Can you handle that, or should I speak to someone more competent? The question felt like a slap, but Maya wrote down every detail. I'll make sure the kitchen gets it exactly right. You'd better. And I'll need a refill on this coffee in 5 minutes. Hot coffee this time. As Maya walked away, she heard him answer another phone call, his voice immediately shifting to a warm, professional tone that was completely different from how he'd spoken to her. The contrast was jarring. A reminder that his rudeness was a choice, not a personality defect. In the kitchen, she relayed the order to Carlos, the cook who'd been working at Rosie's for 15 years. His dark eyes flashed with annoyance when she repeated the customer's specific demands. "Sounds like a real charmer," Carlos muttered, cracking eggs onto the griddle with perhaps more force than necessary. "Don't worry, Maya. I'll make it perfect." Guys like that, they're just looking for reasons to complain. Maya leaned against the pass window, watching Carlos work with the efficiency of long practice. "I just don't understand why some people feel the need to be so cruel. It doesn't cost anything to be decent." "Some folks never learn that lesson," Carlos replied, flipping the eggs with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Or maybe they forgot it along the way. Money has a way of making people forget they're human." The order was ready in 10 minutes, plated with the kind of precision that would have impressed a food critic. Maya carried it out, setting it down carefully in front of the difficult customer. He examined each component like a food inspector, cutting into the eggs to check their consistency, testing the crispness of the bacon between his fingers. "The eggs are acceptable," he said finally, as if bestowing a great favor. "The bacon could be crisper, but I suppose it will have to do. And my coffee cup is empty. Were you planning to refill it, or should I flag down another waitress?" Maya bit back her first response and simply nodded. "Right away, sir." As she refilled his cup, he continued his critique. "The hash browns are under-seasoned, and this toast looks like it's been sitting under a heat lamp. Does this establishment have any standards at all?" "I'm sorry you're not completely satisfied," Maya said, gripping the coffee pot tightly. "Is there anything else I can get you? Competent service would be a start. But I suppose that's asking too much from a place like this." The comment hit harder than she'd expected. Maya excused herself and retreated to the kitchen, where she found herself blinking back tears. It wasn't just the rudeness. It was the way he dismissed her so completely, as if her effort meant nothing. Rosie appeared at her side, having noticed her distress. "What's wrong, honey?" "I'm fine," Maya said quickly, "just adjusting to the new job." "That man giving you trouble?" Maya shrugged, not trusting her voice. Rosie studied her for a moment, then patted her shoulder gently. "You know what I've learned in 30 years of running this place? The customers who are hardest on the staff are usually the ones fighting the biggest battles inside themselves. Hurt people, as they say." "Maybe," Maya said. "But that doesn't make it easier." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. To deal with. No, it doesn't. But it might help you understand that it's not really about you. People like that, they're carrying something heavy, and they don't know how to put it down. Maya appreciated Rosie's wisdom, but understanding didn't make the treatment any less painful. She returned to the dining room to check on her other tables, grateful for customers who treated her with basic human decency. The difficult customer finished his meal and signaled for the check. Maya brought it over, prepared for another round of criticism. Instead, he simply looked at the total and placed exact change on the table, down to the penny. No tip, of course. "Have a good day," Maya said out of habit. He was already standing, adjusting his expensive watch. "We'll see. Oh, and next time, try to remember that customer service is about serving the customer, not going through the motions." With that parting shot, he strode out of the diner, leaving Maya standing beside the empty table. She stared at the exact change for a long moment, feeling a mixture of hurt and anger that surprised her with its intensity. "Good riddance," Carlos called from the kitchen. "Guy like that probably hasn't worked an honest day in his life." Maya cleared the table mechanically, wiping down the surface with perhaps more vigor than necessary. She told herself it didn't matter, that difficult customers were part of the job, that she couldn't let one person's behavior affect her so deeply. But the truth was, his words had found their mark. The lunch rush began in earnest, and Maya threw herself into the work. She took orders, delivered food, refilled coffee cups, and tried to provide the kind of warm, attentive service that Rosie's was known for. Most customers were pleasant, some even friendly, leaving small tips that added up slowly but surely. During a brief lull, Maya found herself thinking about the rude customer. There had been something familiar about him, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. His expensive clothes and entitled attitude marked him as someone from the business world she'd once inhabited, but she couldn't recall meeting him specifically. "You're doing great, Mira," Rosie said, appearing with a plate of the daily special. "Eat something. You need to keep your strength up." Maya realized she hadn't eaten anything all day, too nervous to have breakfast and too busy since arriving at work. The meatloaf and mashed potatoes smelled amazing, and she felt her stomach growl in response. "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by Rosie's kindness. "You didn't have to do that." "Course I did. We take care of family here, and your family now." The simple statement brought tears to Maya's eyes. After months of feeling lost and alone, struggling to rebuild her life from scratch, Rosie's words felt like a lifeline. She ate quickly, savoring both the food and the feeling of belonging. The afternoon shift passed more smoothly. Maya began to find her rhythm, anticipating customers' needs and moving through the restaurant with growing confidence. She made a few small mistakes, but nothing that couldn't be quickly corrected, and her tip jar slowly filled with crumpled bills and loose change. As the day wound down, she found herself thinking about the difficult customer again. His words still stung, but she was beginning to see them differently. Rosie was right, hurt people did hurt people. And despite his expensive clothes and arrogant attitude, there had been something in his eyes that suggested he was carrying his own burdens. "You made it through your first day," Carlos said as he cleaned down the grill. "That's something to be proud of." "Barely," Maya said with a rueful smile. "I feel like I spent half the day apologizing for things that weren't really my fault." "That's the restaurant business," Carlos replied. "You'll develop thicker skin, but don't let it make you hard, you know? The world needs people who still care about doing things right." Maya appreciated his advice. She'd always prided herself on her work ethic, on going above and beyond what was expected. Losing her previous job hadn't been her fault. The company had downsized and eliminated her entire department, but it had still felt like a personal failure. Starting over at nearly 30 was humbling in ways she hadn't anticipated. As she counted her tips at the end of the shift, Maya felt a small surge of accomplishment. It wasn't much, certainly not what she'd been making in her previous career. But it was honest money earned through hard work. And more importantly, it was a beginning. Rosie locked up the restaurant as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "You did good today, Maya. Real good. That customer this morning, don't let him get under your skin. His kind, they're all bark and no bite." Maya nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. There had been something particularly cutting about the man's demeanor, a precision to his cruelty that suggested practice. But she was determined not to let one difficult interaction overshadow what had otherwise been a successful first day. Walking home through the quiet streets, Maya reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, she'd been living in a different city, working in a gleaming office tower, planning a future that had seemed secure and predictable. Now she was serving coffee and taking orders in a small mountain town, living paycheck to paycheck and hoping for the best. But there was something to be said for the simplicity of it, for the immediate satisfaction of work well done and customers served. In her previous job, success had been measured in quarterly reports and abstract metrics. Here, it was measured in hot coffee delivered promptly and tables cleared efficiently. There was an honesty to it that she found surprisingly appealing. Her studio apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but it was clean and warm. Maya made herself a simple dinner and sat by the window, looking out at the lights beginning to twinkle in the valley below. Tomorrow would bring another day at the diner. Another chance to prove herself worthy of Rosie's faith in her. She thought again about the rude customer and wondered if she'd see him again. Part of her hoped not, but another part was curious about what had made him so bitter, so determined to spread his unhappiness to others. Rosie's words about hurting people echoed in her mind, and she found herself wondering what pain might be hiding behind his expensive suit and cutting words. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, with frost glittering on the windows of Rosie's diner. Maya arrived early, wanting to make sure she was fully prepared for whatever the day might bring. She helped Rosie set up the dining room, arranging chairs and filling sugar dispensers with the methodical care of someone determined to get every detail right. "You're here early," Rosie observed, tying her apron around her waist. "Most people need a few days to get into the rhythm." "I couldn't sleep," Maya admitted. "Kept thinking about yesterday. About what I could have done better." Rosie paused in her preparations to study Maya's face. "Honey, you did just fine yesterday. Better than fine, actually. That customer was testing you, seeing how far he could push before you'd break. But you didn't break, did you?" Maya considered this. "No, I guess I didn't. But I wanted to. There were moments when I wanted to tell him exactly what I thought of his attitude. But you didn't, because you're a professional. And because you understand that the job is bigger than any one difficult customer." The morning rush began earlier than expected, with a steady stream of commuters stopping for coffee and breakfast sandwiches. Maya found herself moving with more confidence than the day before, remembering orders without writing them down, and anticipating customers' needs before they had to ask. Around 10:30, the bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see a familiar figure entering the diner. Her heart sank as the rude customer from yesterday surveyed the dining room before selecting the same corner booth he'd occupied before. Maya took a deep breath and approached his table with a fresh pot of coffee and a menu, determined to provide excellent service regardless of his attitude. "Good morning," she said with a genuine smile. "Coffee to start?" The man looked up from his phone, and for a moment something flickered across his face that might have been surprise. "You're still here." "Still here," Maya confirmed, filling his cup with steady hands. "Would you like to see a menu, or do you know what you'd like?" He studied her for a moment, as if trying to understand something. "You're not what I expected." "Sir?" "Yesterday. Most people would have quit after the way I treated you. Or at least found an excuse to avoid my table." Maya set the coffee pot down carefully. "I'm here to do a job, and I'm going to do it well, regardless of how customers treat me. Would you like to order breakfast?" For the first time since she'd met him, the man's expression shifted slightly. The cold arrogance was still there, but underneath it she caught a glimpse of something that might have been respect. "I'll have the same as yesterday," he said, "and I'll try to be less of an ass about it." The unexpected admission caught Maya off guard. "I appreciate that, sir. I'll get your order right in." As she walked away, Maya found herself reassessing the situation. Maybe Rosie was right about hurting people. Maybe there was more to this customer than his abrasive exterior suggested. In the kitchen, Carlos raised an eyebrow when she relayed the order. "Same guy as yesterday?" "He came back?" "Apparently. And he almost apologized for his behavior." "Almost apologized?" "He said he'd try to be less of an ass." Carlos laughed despite himself. "Well, that's progress, I guess. Maybe he's trainable after all." The breakfast came together quickly, and Maya delivered it with the same careful attention to detail she'd shown the day before. The customer examined the plate as he had before, but this time his critique was less harsh. "Better," he said simply. "The eggs are cooked properly." "I'm glad you're satisfied," Maya replied, refilling his coffee cup. "Let me know if you need anything else." "Actually," he said, catching her before she could walk away, I wanted to ask you something. Yesterday, when I was being deliberately difficult, you never lost your temper. You never snapped back or gave me attitude. Why? Maya considered the question carefully. Because that's not who I am, and because I understand that customer service is about serving customers, even when they're having a bad day. Something shifted in the man's expression, a crack in the armor he wore. Even when they're taking their bad day out on you? Especially then, Maya said. Someone has to break the cycle. The man nodded slowly, as if processing this information. That's an interesting philosophy. It's served me well so far. Has it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're working in a diner instead of using whatever education and skills obviously brought you here. The observation stung because it was accurate, but Maya kept her composure. Everyone's path is different. Sometimes life takes you places you didn't expect to go. That's certainly true, the man said, his voice carrying a note she hadn't heard before. Something almost vulnerable. More true than you might imagine. Before Maya could respond, the bell chimed again, and a group of construction workers entered, looking for coffee and a quick breakfast before starting their day. She excused herself to attend to them, but found herself glancing back at the corner booth throughout the morning. The customer finished his meal without further incident, leaving exact change again, but adding a small tip this time. It wasn't much, maybe 10%, but it felt like a victory nonetheless. As he prepared to leave, he paused at Maya's station. "Thank you for the service," he said formally. "Both days." "It's my pleasure," Maya replied, meaning it more than she'd expected to. "I'm sure I'll see you again soon." There was something in the way he said it that made Maya think he meant it as more than just a casual comment. After he left, she found herself wondering again about his story, about what had shaped him into someone who used cruelty as a default mode of interaction. The rest of the day passed without major incident. Maya continued to build relationships with regular customers, learning their preferences and establishing the kind of easy rapport that made work feel less like work. She helped train a new busboy, shared cooking tips with Carlos, and listened to Rosie's stories about the early days of the diner. But part of her mind kept returning to the difficult customer and his unexpected moment of vulnerability. There had been something almost familiar about his voice when he dropped his guard, as if she'd heard him speak that way before. The feeling nagged at her throughout the afternoon. As she prepared to leave for the day, Rosie pulled her aside. "How are you feeling about the job? Really feeling, not just being polite?" Maya considered the question honestly. "Better than I expected. Harder than I thought it would be in some ways, easier in others. The work itself isn't complicated, but dealing with difficult people is draining. That customer who's been giving you trouble, he's been in a few times over the past couple months. Always sits alone. Always seems angry about something. But today was different. He seemed almost human." "He did apologize, sort of. Said he'd try to be less of an ass." Rosie laughed. "High praise from someone like that. You know what I think? I think you're exactly what this place needed. Someone who remembers that every customer is a person, even the ones who forget it themselves." Maya felt a warm glow at the praise. After months of feeling like a failure, of questioning her worth and her choices, it meant everything to hear that she was making a positive difference. That evening, as she walked home through the cooling air, Maya reflected on the strange dance she and the difficult customer seemed to be engaged in. He pushed, she held firm. He tested, she remained professional. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something was shifting between them. She wondered what would happen if she saw him again tomorrow. Part of her was curious to see if his promise to be less difficult would hold, or if yesterday's moment of humanity had been an aberration. Either way, she was determined to maintain her own standards, to treat him with the same professionalism and quiet dignity she offered every customer. The next few days established a pattern. The man arrived each morning around the same time, ordered the same breakfast, and engaged in increasingly civil conversation with Maya. His tips grew slightly larger each day, and his criticism became more constructive than cruel. On Thursday morning, he surprised her by ordering something different. "I'll try the pancakes today," he said, closing the menu decisively. "And fresh fruit instead of hash browns." Excellent choice, Maya said, making a note of the order. Carlos makes them from scratch every morning. Carlos is the cook. For 15 years. He's amazing. Really takes pride in his work. The man nodded thoughtfully. Pride in work is rare these days. Most people just go through the motions. I think most people want to do good work, Maya said carefully. Sometimes they just need to feel like it matters. You think what you do here matters? The question caught her off guard with its directness. I think it matters to the people I serve. A hot meal, friendly service, a place to sit and feel welcome. That might not seem like much, but for some people, it might be the best part of their day. Something flickered across the man's face. The best part of their day. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses make the biggest difference. When Maya brought his pancakes, he tasted them with the same careful attention he'd given his previous meals. But this time, his assessment was genuinely positive. These are excellent, he said, and seemed to mean it. Please give my compliments to Carlos. I will. He'll be thrilled to hear it. As the man ate, Maya noticed him watching the other customers, observing the interactions between staff and patrons with what seemed like professional interest. When an elderly regular complained that his coffee was too weak, Maya quickly brought him a fresh cup from a stronger pot without being asked. When a young mother struggled to keep her toddler entertained while eating, Carlos quietly sent out a small bowl of crackers shaped like animals. You all do this naturally, the man observed when Maya returned to refill his coffee. Do what? Anticipate needs. Solve problems before they become complaints. Care about the details. Maya shrugged. It's just good customer service. No, it's more than that. It's hospitality. There's a difference. The distinction seemed important to him, though Maya wasn't entirely sure why. She was beginning to understand that beneath his expensive clothes and initially abrasive manner, he was someone who noticed things, who paid attention to how businesses operated and how people treated each other. Friday brought an unexpected test. The morning rush was heavier than usual, and Maya found herself juggling multiple tables while trying to keep everyone happy. In the middle of the chaos, a coffee pot malfunctioned, sending scalding coffee across the counter and creating a dangerous mess. Maya moved quickly to contain the spill and ensure no one was injured, but the delay meant several customers had to wait longer than usual for their orders. Most were understanding, but one businessman became increasingly agitated, checking his watch and muttering under his breath. The difficult customer, who had been watching the situation unfold from his corner booth, suddenly stood and approached the agitated man. "Excuse me," he said in a voice that carried quiet authority. "I couldn't help but notice your frustration. The staff here is dealing with an equipment malfunction, and they're handling it as efficiently as possible under the circumstances." The businessman looked up, ready to argue, but something in the other man's demeanor gave him pause. "I just need to get to a meeting." "I understand, but taking your frustration out on the waitress won't get you there any faster. And frankly, the level of service you typically receive here is exceptional. One small delay doesn't change that." The businessman looked uncertain, as if unsure whether to be offended or chastened. After a moment, he nodded grudgingly and returned to his newspaper. Maya, who had overheard the exchange while cleaning up the coffee spill, felt a rush of gratitude that surprised her with its intensity. The difficult customer had defended her, had stood up for the entire staff without being asked. When she brought his check a few minutes later, she couldn't hide her appreciation. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you said to that man. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he replied, his voice serious. "Excellence should be recognized and protected. What you do here, what this whole team does, it matters. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to benefit from it." The comment revealed a side of him Maya hadn't seen before, a principled core beneath the polished exterior. As he prepared to leave, she found herself hoping he'd return the following week. Over the weekend, Maya found herself thinking about the week's interactions with increasing frequency. There was something about the man that nagged at her, a sense of familiarity that went beyond their recent encounters. She was sure she'd never met him before starting work at the diner, but his voice, his mannerisms, something about him felt known. Monday morning brought the answer. Maya arrived at work to find Rosie in the office, looking over paperwork with an expression of worry that immediately set off alarm bells. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, untying her jacket. "I got a call this weekend," Rosie said, not looking up from the papers. "From the company that owns this building. Apparently they're considering selling, and the new owners might have different plans for the space." Maya's heart sank. What kind of different plans? Could be anything. Retail, offices, condos. They haven't decided yet, but it doesn't look good for small businesses like us. The news hit Maya harder than she'd expected. In just 1 week, Rosie's had become more than a job to her. It was a lifeline, a place where she felt valued and useful. The thought of losing it so soon after finding it was almost unbearable. "Is there anything we can do?" she asked. "Not much. The lease is up for renewal in 6 months, and if they decide not to renew, that's it. We'll have to find a new location or close down entirely." Maya spent the morning in a fog of worry and disappointment. The customers seemed to sense her distraction, and several asked if she was feeling all right. She tried to maintain her usual cheerful demeanor, but it was a struggle. When the difficult customer arrived for his usual breakfast, he immediately noticed something was wrong. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he observed, settling into his customary booth. "Just some bad news about the restaurant," Maya said, pouring his coffee with less steadiness than usual. "Nothing that affects the service, of course." "What kind of bad news?" Maya hesitated. She'd made it a policy not to burden customers with the restaurant's problems, but something about his expression encouraged honesty. "The building might be sold. New owners might not want a diner here. We could lose our lease when it comes up for renewal." The man's expression darkened. "That would be a shame. This place has character. Real character. Not like the chain restaurants that are taking over everywhere else. Rosie's been here for 30 years. She's built something special, something that matters to the community. But I guess that doesn't count for much when it comes to business decisions." "You'd be surprised," the man said quietly. "Sometimes it counts for more than you think." There was something in his tone that made Maya look at him more carefully, but before she could analyze it further, another customer signaled for her attention. The day passed slowly, weighted down by uncertainty about the future. Maya found herself looking around the dining room with new eyes, noticing details she'd taken for granted. The way the afternoon light fell across the worn wooden tables, the comfortable sounds of conversation and clinking silverware, the sense of community that pervaded the space. As closing time approached, Maya was surprised to see the difficult customer return. He rarely came in twice in one day, and never this late. "We're actually about to close," she said apologetically. "The kitchen's already shut down." "I'm not here for food," he said. "I wanted to talk to you about something, about the situation with the building." Maya glanced around the empty dining room. Rosie had left early for a doctor's appointment, and Carlos was finishing up in the kitchen. "What about it? You mentioned that this place has been here for 30 years, that it matters to the community." "It does. Rosie's is more than just a restaurant. It's where people come to celebrate good news and find comfort during hard times. It's where high school kids have their first jobs, and where retirees come to feel connected. It's part of the fabric of this town." The man nodded slowly. "And you believe that has value beyond just profit and loss?" "Absolutely. Some things can't be measured in spreadsheets." "That's a beautiful sentiment. But the reality is that businesses operate on financial fundamentals. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills." Maya felt a flare of frustration. "I understand that, but there has to be room in the world for places like this. Not everything has to be optimized and corporatized." "You're right," the man said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "There does have to be room for places like this." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Maya, can I ask you something? Why did you take this job? You're clearly educated, articulate, capable of much more than waiting tables. What brought you here?" The question was personal. More personal than any customer had a right to ask, but something about his tone, about the way he defended her earlier, made her want to answer honestly. "I lost my previous job through no fault of my own. Company downsizing. I've been trying to rebuild ever since, but it's harder than I expected. This job, this place, it's given me hope again. Reminded me that honest work has dignity, regardless of what that work is. The man studied her face for a long moment. Hope is a valuable commodity, more valuable than most people realize. After he left, Maya found herself wondering again about his identity, about why their conversations felt increasingly important to her. There was depth to him that his initial rudeness had masked, a complexity that intrigued her despite herself. Tuesday brought a surprise that changed everything. Maya arrived at work to find Rosie talking animatedly with a man in an expensive suit. The papers she'd been worried about spread across one of the tables. But instead of looking distressed, Rosie appeared excited, almost giddy. "Maya," she called out, "come over here. I want you to meet someone." Maya approached cautiously, uncertain what to expect. The man in the suit stood and extended his hand with a warm smile. "You must be Maya. I've heard wonderful things about you. I'm David Rodriguez, and I represent the new ownership group for this building." Maya shook his hand, confused by Rosie's obvious delight. "New ownership group?" "That's right. We completed the purchase yesterday, and I'm here to discuss the lease renewal with Ms. Martinez. But I thought the new owners might not want a diner here," Maya said, looking between David and Rosie. David's smile widened. "On the contrary, we're very committed to preserving the character and community value of this establishment. In fact, we're prepared to offer a 15-year lease at extremely favorable terms." Maya felt a surge of relief so intense it made her dizzy. "That's wonderful news." "It gets better," Rosie said, practically bouncing with excitement. "They want to help us expand. New equipment, additional seating, maybe even catering services." "How is this possible?" Maya asked, still trying to process the sudden reversal of fortune. "Well," David said, glancing toward the door, "that's a story best told by someone else." The bell chimed, and Maya turned to see a familiar figure entering the diner. But instead of his usual expensive suit, the difficult customer was dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, looking more approachable than she'd ever seen him. "Maya," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that had been absent during their first encounters. "I believe we need to have a proper introduction. I'm Marcus Bennett, and I own the investment group that just purchased this building." Maya's mouth fell open as the pieces finally clicked into place. The familiar voice, the way he'd observed the restaurant's operations, his defense of her service quality, his questions about the business. He hadn't been a difficult customer at all. He'd been conducting the most thorough job interview of her life. "You're the owner," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am. And you, Maya Chen, are exactly the kind of employee this place deserves. Actually, you're exactly the kind of person this place deserves." Rosie was grinning from ear to ear. "He told me everything, Mia. How you handled his test. How you never lost your professionalism even when he was being deliberately difficult. He said you showed him what real hospitality looks like." Marcus stepped closer, his expression serious despite the momentous revelation. "I want to apologize for the way I treated you those first few days. It wasn't personal, but I know that doesn't make it any easier to endure. I needed to see how you'd handle pressure, how you'd treat someone who was being unreasonable. Customer service is easy when customers are nice. Character shows when they're not." Maya was still processing the information. "So this was all a test?" "Not all of it. The rudeness was a test. But my compliments about the food, about the service, about what this place means to the community, that was all genuine. And my interest in preserving what Rosie has built here, that's completely real." David Rodriguez stepped forward with a folder of documents. "We'd like to offer you a position as assistant manager, with the opportunity to work toward full management if you're interested. The salary is substantially more than what you're making now, plus benefits and profit sharing." Maya looked around the diner, at Rosie's expectant face, at Carlos who had emerged from the kitchen to witness the scene. Just a week ago, she'd been desperate for any job that would pay the bills. Now she was being offered a chance to build a career in a place that had already begun to feel like home. "I don't understand," she said. "Why me?" "You barely know me." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. I know that you treated me with dignity, even when I didn't deserve it. I know that you care about doing things right, not just getting by. I know that you understand the difference between a job and a calling. And I know that when equipment breaks and customers get difficult, you step up instead of falling apart. Plus, Rosie added with a laugh, you make excellent coffee. The absurdity of the situation finally hit Maya, and she found herself laughing despite the emotional whiplash of the morning. I can't believe this is real. It's real, Marcus assured her, and it's just the beginning. I've been looking for the right place to invest in community-driven hospitality, and Rosie's is exactly what I've been seeking. But more than that, I've been looking for people who understand that business success and human decency aren't mutually exclusive. You proved that they can coexist beautifully. Maya felt tears threatening, but these were tears of joy and relief rather than frustration and hurt. I accept. The position, the opportunity, all of it. Thank you for seeing something in me that I wasn't sure was still there. It was always there, Marcus said. You just needed the right place to let it shine. As the morning rush began, Maya found herself moving through the familiar routines with new energy and purpose. Customers noticed the change in atmosphere immediately, commenting on the palpable excitement that seemed to fill the air. She served coffee with a smile that came from deep within, took orders with renewed enthusiasm, and felt grateful for every interaction. Marcus stayed for lunch, sitting at his usual corner booth but now engaging warmly with other customers, complimenting Carlos on the food, and discussing expansion plans with Rosie. The transformation was remarkable, as if the difficult customer had been a character he'd been playing rather than his true self. During a quiet moment, Maya approached his table with fresh coffee. Can I ask you something? Of course. Was any of it real? The way you acted those first few days? Marcus considered the question carefully. The rudeness was manufactured for the test, but the loneliness behind it, the sense of being disconnected from genuine human interaction, that was very real. I've spent so many years in boardrooms and business meetings where everything is transactional that I'd almost forgotten what authentic hospitality feels like. And now I remember. Thanks to you and this place, I remember what it feels like to be treated like a human being rather than a profit center. Maya nodded, understanding more than she'd expected to. We all need reminding sometimes. As the day continued, word of the restaurant's salvation and Maya's promotion spread through the small community. Regular customers stopped by to congratulate Rosie and meet the new investor. The elderly man who'd complained about weak coffee brought flowers for Maya. The construction workers who came in for breakfast every day promised to spread the word about the improved lease situation. By closing time, Maya felt as though she'd lived through several lifetimes in a single day. The emotional journey from despair to hope to joy had been exhausting, but in the best possible way. As she prepared to leave, Marcus approached her one final time. Maya, there's something else I want you to know. The way you handled yourself this week, the grace and professionalism you showed even when I was being awful, it changed my perspective on a lot of things. You reminded me that how we treat people matters more than what we accomplish. That kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. I'm just glad it worked out for everyone, Maya said. Rosie deserves to see her life's work continue. Carlos deserves job security. This community deserves to keep its gathering place. And you deserve recognition for making it all possible. Your character, your integrity, your refusal to compromise your values even under pressure, that's what saved this place. That's what convinced me to invest here instead of somewhere else. 6 months later, Rosie's diner had been transformed while maintaining its essential character. New equipment made the kitchen more efficient, additional seating accommodated growing crowds, and a catering service brought the restaurant's home-style cooking to events throughout the region. Maya had settled into her management role with natural grace, implementing systems that improved service while preserving the warmth and personal attention that made the place special. Marcus had become a regular customer in the best sense, stopping by weekly for breakfast and staying connected to the business without micromanaging its daily operations. His initial test had evolved into genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared values. The relationship between them had deepened beyond professional courtesy, though neither had rushed to define it. They'd been through too much, learned too much about each other's character under pressure, to treat their connection casually. When Marcus finally asked Maya to dinner at a restaurant other than Rosie's, her acceptance felt like the natural next step in a story that had begun with broken coffee cups and harsh words. Standing in the same dining room where she'd once cleaned up spilled coffee with shaking hands, Maya reflected on the unexpected paths that had brought her to this moment. She'd lost a job and found a calling. She'd faced cruelty and responded with kindness. She'd been tested without knowing it, and passed in ways that mattered more than any formal evaluation. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see a young woman entering hesitantly, clutching a resume and looking nervous about what appeared to be her first job interview. Maya smiled, remembering her own anxiety just months earlier, and moved forward to greet the newcomer with the same warmth and encouragement Rosie had shown her. "Welcome to Rosie's," she said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd found her place in the world. "You must be Sarah. I'm Maya, and I'm so glad you're here." As she led the nervous applicant to a quiet table, Maya caught sight of Marcus reading his newspaper in the corner booth, now truly his usual spot, rather than a strategic observation post. He looked up and smiled, the expression reaching his eyes as it had ever since the day he'd revealed his true identity. Outside, the mountain town bustled with its usual rhythm of work and life and small daily dramas. Inside Rosie's diner, the coffee was hot, the service was warm, and the future stretched ahead like an open road, full of possibility and promise. Maya had learned that sometimes the most difficult customers become the most valuable allies. Sometimes the worst days lead to the best opportunities. And sometimes, when you treat people with dignity regardless of how they treat you, you create space for transformation that benefits everyone involved. The story of the new waitress who served the rude customer had become the story of two people who found exactly what they needed in the most unexpected circumstances. It was a reminder that character is revealed not in moments of ease but in moments of testing. And that sometimes, the most important interviews are the ones we don't know we're taking. As Maya poured coffee for Sarah and began explaining the restaurant's philosophy of genuine hospitality, she felt grateful for every difficult moment that had brought her to this place of purpose and belonging. The coffee was perfect, the service was exceptional, and the future was bright with possibility. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.